feeling lucky?
The locals think it's a curse.
I need to get out of this place. I'm not crazy! Whatever I've seen at night, it's real. When you experience something disorienting, close your eyes.
I think we use a wooden stake.
What?
They're vampires, duh.
The house always wins.
Game over.
Hello, everyone. My name is Clarke Wolfe. Welcome to Beyond Fest and welcome to the Blumhouse. Today, we are going to be talking to the creators of the new round of the Welcome to the Blumhouse program. Special thank you to Blumhouse Television, Amazon, and of course, Beyond Fest. So with me today, I have executive producer of the Welcome to the Blumhouse program, Lisa Bruce. I have writer-director of The Manor, Axel Carolyn. I have writer-director of Bingo Hell, Gigi Saul Guerrero. The director of Black as Night, Marty Ligo. And one of the writers of Madres, Marcela Ochoa. Marcela, great to see you. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
So I wanted to start by saying I loved all of these films. They felt so different and so unique to all of you as creators. And yet I noticed that there were a lot of shared themes sort of across the board, which I think is so interesting because, you know, horror is a lot of times very cyclical. It's that, you know, something will catch in pop culture, in a society, et cetera, and filmmakers sort of naturally discuss it. So I thought that was something that was very special about all of these films. And we'll get into that a little more deeply. But first, I wanted to start by asking all of you a question. You all are very experienced across the entire entertainment industry. You are actors, you are writers, you are ADs, you are directors, you are producers. So starting with Axel, and then we'll go around. If y'all could just talk a little bit about, do you feel like your overall experience in the process of making films, making television from all facets helped you or informed how you approached your piece for Welcome to the Blumhouse? So Axel, I'd love to start with you.
Hey, Clarke. That's a pretty vast question. Yes, I would say absolutely. I mean, everything you do in this industry helps you understand the process a little bit better. And every time you direct, you get a little bit more, you understand the technical side of it a little bit better as well. But I was fortunate enough to get to do a lot of weird, odd jobs before I started directing, partly because I think it took me a while to find the guts to just kind of go, this is what I want to do. But I was a writer for the longest time. I worked as a publicist for a little bit. I even acted pretty badly for a little bit. I did all kinds of little things that allow you to, it's easier to speak to an actor if you've been in front of the camera, I think. And then obviously writing and directing short films and a feature and, you know, producing another feature, making a part of that everything helps you, hopefully get better.
Gigi, would you agree? I know you are an accomplished voice actor. You're known in front of the camera. You are a writer. You are a director. How did that inform making Bingo Hell?
Well, let me start. No, I'm kidding. No, thank you so much. I appreciate it. But I couldn't agree more with Axel. You know, I think at the end of the day, though, film is collaboration. Film is a team. Film is a family. And, you know, the more you do other jobs and you start off by learning all sides of the crew and all sides of film, you're going to fully understand how to lead the ship. You know, even back in film school, man, I was like the top boom op. Let me tell you, I was like, and it was great. And that's how you watch from others. And even though my career kicked off mostly with acting and a lot of voice acting. Hearing how other people direct is a really cool thing. And also you can take some notes of what not to do sometimes too, right? But it's a great way to just, I mean, I couldn't agree more, to put yourself in the perspective of the actors, to put yourself in the perspective of the crew. You have that sympathy, and you have also that door open for them to give you creatively what they have to offer. It's not a one person show, so for me it's exciting, and at the end of the day it's also life experience too, what you've gone through outside of film. I can tell you, I was a carny for 8 years. Yeah, a carny for 8 years, a carny during the day, filmmaker at night, and working at the haunted house for a long time. And you find inspiration with different things you do in your life and live it to the fullest. So yeah, for sure, it's a lot of things.
I love that. Marty, how about you?
Yeah, same thing. I started out with acting as well, and then kind of went to the producing path, even though I had always wanted to, write and direct. I think being able to, I learned the most probably from producing, because in producing, you work with every single department on the crew, including actors, including costume, hair, makeup, grip team, and you meet so many different personalities, and difficult ones and easy ones. And so when you are working with every single department and every type of personality, then when you're a director, you're not asking for ridiculous things that that the budget can't support, or the locations, or the crew members can't support. And so when you have that knowledge of even the numbers of the budget, of how that could possibly work, then you can work together and collaborate and make it a more pleasant experience, I think. So I think all of that experience has made me a better leader and a better communicator. And I'm very much thankful for all the hardships of, acting and getting rejected. Mm-hmm. And then seeing it from the director's point of view of like, okay, you just didn't match my vision. Their smile was different. In my head, I wanted, darker eyebrows or something. So then now that I look back at what I felt when I was an actor, I was like, oh man, I suck. But it's not even just about that. There's so much more to the bigger picture. So yeah, all that background has definitely helped.
Marcela, how about you, especially writing a piece like Madres, which I can't wait to unpack a little bit more, but how would you say your experience in the industry helped with making this, or writing this film, approaching this film?
Yeah, I've had jobs in like various aspects of the industry. So I started out in international publicity at Sony. So yeah, like Axel, the PR background I find so helpful, because a lot of times when I'm writing the script, I'm thinking, well, horror, what is the trailer moment? What is, I'm thinking a lot of that when I write, like you have to have those moments. And so a lot of my PR background, because I'm thinking of always marketing, a lot of that comes first, goes into my writing of like, well, what are these moments? Who's going to be the audience? How are we getting people in to see this film? So that influences a lot of my writing. And then I left Sony to run a production company, a big production company. I was learning on like $200 million films. Like I was saying, like producing and learning in production was invaluable, because then I know like, oh, you know what, if this is the budget, I cannot write this big, huge action explosion scene. Let me see, what can I do like budget wise? And so sometimes I'll work backwards at the constraint of the budget of like what I can do, but still get the story across. And actually I started acting too a long time ago, and I was like 17, 18. But my experience was, there was always, being Latina, it was like the chola, it was, the gang member's girlfriend, the maid's daughter. It was all of these roles that I didn't want. And that had pursued me to go into writing and create roles, especially for Latinas, that we don't see, that aren't stereotypical. And Madres was one of those films that I always wanted to write about a migrant like farming community. And I'll get into more of that of the characters, but it was something important to me that we don't see, and it wasn't stereotypical. And it's from the years of, starting off acting that, pushed me to want to write these roles that they just weren't available. Like I just felt, in the casting process, I was like, well, I don't want any of these roles, but let me create roles that don't exist.
Lisa, for you, this is the second round of Welcome to the Blumhouse. And so I was curious for you, what was it that you were looking for, or Blumhouse Television was looking for when you were, selecting this group of filmmakers for this group of films?
Yeah, I mean, what's great about this series is the whole overview of it was to bring in all these diverse voices, just voices we don't typically get to hear, and not just in the horror genre, but just in general in terms of directors, and also all diverse cast. So it's a lot of typically, and the stories tend to be around more marginalized communities and individuals that we don't get to see sort of rise as heroes, and we all know in our lives they are heroes. So it's really exciting because that's what we were looking for, really, is just 100% sort of diverse, interesting, innovative, and new. And I think what's been really fun for me in this is I've worked on a lot of movies, but I'm also been in the business long enough to sort of be around where I feel like I'm always the minority as a woman on a set. And it's been really, really exciting, particularly this set of films, because it's predominantly obviously female filmmakers and all female voices. And there's just something you experience, or I've experienced so much in my career, where the female perspective kind of isn't there a lot in a lot of shows, and shows even where there's female characters, because it'll be a male director and a male writer writing the woman, and you're sort of the female producer going, I don't know if she would say that. And this has been so refreshing and fun for me, because in a way it sort of let me not worry about that so much, because they're all female voices that have been so empowered and by the series. So it's been really great.
I feel, yes. Cheers, cheers, cheers. I relate to everything that you all have just said. So Axel, let's talk about the manor. I have a lot of questions about this, but I want to start with Barbara Hershey. So she is fabulous in this role. She is an acclaimed actress across the board, but so for me, she's a genre icon, not only the entity, but, she's showing up in Insidious, and other projects in between. So can you talk to me about working with her and how her casting in this lead role came about?
Right. Yeah, I love Barbara. I've been a fan for a very long time. I saw The Entity when I was probably way too young to see it or to even understand completely what was going on.
Axel, I watched The Entity for the first time like 3 years ago, and I think I was too young to see it.
Oh, man. There's an argument to be made that we're not. Yeah, it was definitely it's an odd one, but I think she's very, very good at grounding. When you see what she does, for example, in The Entity, where it's such an outrageous situation that she's into, and she makes you really feel for that woman. She really gives that woman a lot of dimension, even though I'm not sure that was completely on the page. And she makes you feel for her and make you kind of ground moments that were maybe sometimes stretched belief a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I was incredibly lucky to cast her for this. It's a difficult role to play, I think, partly because you need to, if you're an actress, especially who is known for a certain type of part, and then you accept the part of someone who's in a nursing home, who's a little bit vulnerable, who is maybe possibly losing her mind, who is, there's a side of you that's very fragile that you need to reveal. And at the same time, she needs to have that very beautiful inner strength that Judith has, where she's not taking no for an answer. She does not let other people tell her what to do, which I love. She's very funny. She is on an equal relationship with her grandson. She's kind of like, the way I described her to Barbara was, I want this person to be who I aspire to be when I get to that age. Like, I want to be that kind of charismatic, witty, fun person to be around. And I think that she really liked that. I think that's something she really responded to. But she's so prepared and she's so focused, and she doesn't come in and just kind of phone it in because it's a horror movie. She is, every line that she delivers, she has to believe in. And sometimes that means that we will argue over it for like 20 minutes. But that's great, because she generally does that because she really cares. She never does that just to be confrontational or just to delay things. And she always does it ahead of time. So we will discuss like the work of the following week or the 2 weeks ahead. We also went through the entire script when we were in prep. So everything was very discussed and we were on the same page for everything. And yeah, and on top of that, she's hilarious. She's so fun to work with. And it's funny because the first week we had to kind of adjust to each other, and you don't know each other, and you're thrown into this crazy situation, and you have to kind of learn how to speak the same language. And the first few days were a little bit kind of like, is this going to work? Is this not going to work? By the end of the shoot, we were making fun of each other. I would come up to give directions. She'd be like, what does she want now? And then I'd be like, well, if you'd stop hamming it up. It was just, we had that relationship where we could make fun of each other and keep it kind of happy and funny and friendly.
It's funny because knowing you in real life, I absolutely was like, Judith is Axel as a 70-year-old woman. There is no question about that. It absolutely read on the page. So mission accomplished there. Let's talk a little bit about one of the biggest themes in the Manor. So a lot of Western cultures, especially in the United States, we idolize, we prioritize youth, not only in the way that we look, but also in, I would argue, which stories we deem are worthy to tell. And yet genre seems to be finding a space where older women can have the space to tell their stories. I feel like the Insidious franchise is a great example. This huge, successful film that ran for so many installments is led by the great Lin Shaye. So what is it that you think about genre storytelling maybe it would allow for a little bit more freedom to tell those types of stories?
I think one of the great things about what I truly love about being a horror filmmaker is that I feel you can express a lot of things that would feel very twee or very sad or very maybe sometimes patronizing or very serious if you didn't do it through the lens of this is a creature feature and you have something to say, but you kind of hide it under the fact that there's really fun elements. And so it's a little bit like Star Trek did, sci-fi, and we all talk about how the great things that Star Trek did for politics at the time and for social times. And I think that horror can do that with emotions, and it can do that with exploring social issues. And yeah, it's we do talk about aging here and the way that older people are perceived, but we do it under cover of what supernatural thing lurks in the house. And it's a very interesting thing because on the one hand you have that, but then on the other hand, the typical audience for a horror movie is usually young boys, or so we're told anyway. I think that the audience is largely female, and there's a lot of women who are over 35 who are hugely into horror. I mean, I'm wearing my Dawn of the Dead t-shirt. So it's an interesting kind of finding your path where some people will still tell you, you have to a certain type of character. Can we not make the grandson the lead? Right. Because that's who people will sympathize with and empathize with. And I completely disagree with that. I think if you have a great leading character, whether it's Lin Shaye, whether it's Barbara Hershey, whether it's, like in Bingo Hell, in Gigi's movie, you will go with it and you will be 100% on their side. And yeah, and I'm really happy that I got to do that. And I'm very, very happy that Blumhouse and Amazon really embraced that. They were excited to do something that was about a segment of the audience that doesn't usually get represented. You don't usually go into a studio and say, I have this movie and the lead is 72 years old. How about it?
So Gigi, I see you shaking your head, and I remember the first time that I remember seeing Adriana, and it was in Drag Me to Hell. And I, from then on, have never forgotten her face. I can see her because she's just captivating. But your film also, centers around an aging community. Do you care to chime in on that topic?
Man, I was so stoked not just to work with seasoned actors. I was like, man, this is gonna be a dream. They're so incredible, all the cast in Bingo, but it was the excitement seeing them do a role they just haven't done. Every day, Adriana was like, wait, no mames, I've never done this before. And like her face of excitement and enthusiasm, carrying a shotgun, having blood all over her face. you see just that extra level that they want to put on the screen, and it's awesome. Like breaking the stereotype of the weak and old on screen was the coolest element, I think. And you can tell with the cast that they wanted to do this, that this is not an opportunity that happens often. Similar to what Axel said, like Adriana said to me, I have yet to do a lead role where I'm embracing my age, I'm embracing my race, my accent, you name it. Like she really is a character we have not seen in a horror film yet, which I'm super excited about. So for
And she
sure.
gets to be a badass, and she gets
Oh
to be a
man, I'm
badass.
stoked. Well, I was just excited. I was like, in Bingo Hell, she really is the representation of like charming, stubborn, old abuelitas, like she is very much she was very much inspired and portrayed my grandma. We studied together her photos, home videos, and a lot of that charm is really how my grandma is. Like in the movie, for those that watch, she goes like yeah all the time for everything. That my grandma does that. Like she really puts so much of that love of how much we love our grandparents or just seniors in general. They're one of a kind. So yeah.
I want to see a
Lisa-
TV show that teams them up. We have
Yeah.
Judith and your characters.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the sequel.
I like it. I like that plan. So Axel, you mentioned a creature feature, and for all of our panelists, I would love to hear from you on this topic. All of your films feature some piece of mythology, or maybe an archetypal character that we might be familiar with. And Axel, so whether it is the crone or maybe some Celtic mythology. Could you talk about sort of your spin on your creature? I know we don't want to spoil anything, but talk about that for a little bit.
I gotta tiptoe around revealing too much on this one, but it's one of the aspects that I get most excited about. I mean, as a horror fan, when you get to put a monster on screen, it's just the greatest time. It's just the best thing to do. So for mine, a lot of the inspiration was originally I wrote this the idea came when I still lived in London. And then I wrote it when I was in LA, but the idea was kind of formed when I was still in Europe. And so surrounded with big trees and kind of a lot of nature and things that are very hard to find when you're shooting in LA, actually. But so it was that idea of just, there's nothing more natural than aging. And so the power of people who are fighting age would come from nature one way or another. And it's that idea of like, if you go against nature, there's got to be a price to pay. Those kinds of everything kind of tied together around that idea of just kind of going back to nature. And there's a lot of kind of Celtic influence that deals with that, going back to the Druids, going back to those kinds of, those images of those old guys with beards climbing the trees to go and cut some mistletoe or something. So all that imagery is kind of part of this. And then there is a monster in the movie, which I'm very happy with and very excited about, which is a whole guy in a suit. And to draw that, to kind of design it, when I went to see Todd Tucker and Illusion Industries, I had a whole reference book of pictures, and they were like, wow, usually directors never come up that prepared for monsters. They just come up and just go like, I want something scary. And I had like images of the shapes that I wanted and the kind of textures that I wanted. And they did such a beautiful job designing it. I absolutely love it. Yeah, and then it's all about kind of the way that you shoot it and the way that you reveal a little bit, but not too much. And then that's one part of it. And the other part, you just mentioned the crone. The movie used to be called Crones, and what I liked about that is that it's kind of what it's about is the fact that the crone originally is this very powerful person. It's with age, you see wisdom, you see power, you see magic, and that's the way that older people used to be seen. And nowadays, when you see crone, when you say crone, you just think of age, and you just think of ugly, and you just think of kind of decay. And the way that the word has evolved, to me, really shows the way that society has changed in the way that we regard older people. And that's the conversation that I was also hoping to, in a small little way, kind of get started with the movie.
Marty, I love your vampire tale, and set in New Orleans very specifically. New Orleans, obviously, in pop culture, is has a lot of connotations with the supernatural, but with vampires specifically, I mean, Interview with the Vampire, but also a very specific white kind of story. I am from Atlanta, and my best friend's mom is from New Orleans. So I have spent a lot of time in that city, and it is a beautiful city. And I was so thrilled to see this topic sort of unpacked and delved into. But the vampire specifically has so much lore and mythology around it. Can you talk a little bit about your film's vampire?
Yes. Black as Night is amazingly written by Sherman Payne. He did a brilliant job of making a vampire that we have never seen before. I'm obsessed with like 30 Days of Night, Interview with the Vampire. I've seen those movies like a million times, but it's never been done in this way. I don't want to reveal too much, but it spans so much history from rooting in Africa to slavery in New Orleans in the United States. And our protagonist is a female Black woman, a young woman who's in high school and, just kind of learning who she is. And now she's up against these other Black vampires that are, again, we've never seen a group of Black vampires, maybe just one, Blade,
Right. And I love the Wesley Snipes, we'll talk about that element later. But that was a great little
nod right there. I hope he sees it. But it's never been seen in this way before. I feel like Marcella was talking about not being able to kind of relate to a lot of movies because you've never seen yourself in this way. And watching vampire movies, it's never really had a protagonist that was a young woman of color ever. I remember putting the pitch together to pitch for this movie, and I was trying to find examples of other movies that are like it. It does not exist. This is one of the first movies like this. And so it was so exciting. And I remember working with Asia, the lead actress, and just being like, oh my God, I get to kick ass. I get to be this. And I'm like, oh, that's incredible. What power it gives to people of color, to women. And so back to the vampires, it was very, very special because we get to see this perspective from a story that we've just never seen, and we get to incorporate the dark history of our country and really explore that these social issues in a deeper way, but in a fun way, using vampires.
So much fun. Marcella, so obviously your film makes a point that, human beings are often the scariest threats that we face, which is powerful in its own right. However, you do have the ghost, the wailing woman, and her origin story, we find out, might be a little different than maybe other traditional figures like that. But can you talk about your supernatural creature?
Yes. So for this film, it was really about, the horror at the end of mankind. But it also, I wanted to be like, well, it does have to be a little scary. We need something supernatural. So we have to have this ghost and this sort of backstory. And so it's this small migrant farming community in California. And, things are happening to this woman who's pregnant, these visions. And so she has to uncover, is it a curse or is there something more nefarious going on? And so I worked backwards from that as, well, what could this curse be? And when my grandma, my grandparents are from Mexico, and they always believed in curses. I mean, even when we were little and we were sick, they'd be like, get the egg, you need an egg cleanse, you need Olympia. And my parents were like, no, we'll take her to the doctor, but it's like, you grow up in this this world. And so, I was thinking like, well, what if things were going on, it's the 70s in a small migrant farming community, and, everything was happening to these women in this community, they would probably think it's a curse. So we worked backwards from that and had, kind of like the curandera healer character to kind of explain more into the spiritual world of what she thinks could be happening and kind of a curse in this town. And then along with the supernatural of this woman who we find out who she is later, her origin story, because I wanted something scary and still supernatural because it is a horror, but then at the end, the reveal of what the actual true horror is that's going on within this community.
Absolutely. Gigi, so in addition to Adriana, you have the Night King himself, Richard Brake,
Yeah.
as our sort of charming devil. You know, he's so many different things. So talk to me about this spin on this sort of archetype, and how you came about casting Richard and that whole process.
No, for sure. Listen, what's crazy, even just while co-writing and creating as reference all over the place. I thought of like, oh, this will be the guy that will play it. It was just his reference photo was on the lookbook. Even his picture was everywhere for the character of Mr. Big. And the moment he auditioned, which I thought was really cool, I was like, "Oh my god, this is meant to be." He's so good. He's awesome. Also, like, as a fan of the genre, I'm totally, I think we all are. Type that you kind of root for the bad guy. You kind of root for the villain. You want to like dress up as the villain. You want to quote the villain. You want to everything the villain. They got to be dope, right? So definitely creating Mr. Big with Richard was so much fun because, one of the things with both studios and myself that we really wanted was we too want to humanize this to relate because the themes are greed. One of the big themes of the movie are greed. And we all, unfortunately, can easily fall into something like that. We all can be, in a way, find the darkest side of ourselves when maybe money is more powerful, right?
Mhm.
And we wanted somebody that is convincing, somebody that's manipulative, like a car salesman. Man, I believe everything they say, those that knock on your door. And they got to be charming. And Richard is so charming as well. He's a very nice guy. So this was so much fun to see him, even though we've seen him play a bad guy a few times, to see him in a different approach. And he was really excited about that. He even says in the film, they say money can't buy you happiness, but I disagree. He's kind of right in a way and wrong. And it was just those kind of things that he would say so grounded and organic. It's easy to fall into his trap. And we just wanted to have so much fun with Richard on his wardrobe, his look. Man, but his smile is everything naturally.
That
And
smile.
like right? Like we had to incorporate that. We incorporated so much of what he is into the script. And man, I think I went on a tangent of your question. I just
No,
got so excited.
he
But
he's outstanding in the movie, and it's been
he's
fun to see
awesome.
him under out, like he doesn't even need the makeup. He doesn't need the,
No.
yeah.
Exactly. And the coolest memory of working with Richard, definitely, like, the without spoiling, but that ending of the movie, that's his entire take of how crazy he is. Like, we used the entire footage because he's nuts. He's awesome. And he was the first actor that, I learned very quickly he's the kind of actor you don't call cut. You don't call cut right away. Let him keep building. And he's so interesting. He like resets himself and builds it and builds it. He's like, well, let me go again. Let me go again. Yeah. Until he himself like he explodes. He fully like popcorn bag, just like pop, it just like goes everywhere. And all of us are just like, we don't even know if he's done. And then he will come down. He's like, did you get that? Like all calm. I just be with my mouth like on the floor, like, yeah, buddy, we got it. Yeah, we definitely got it. And I would be so stoked watching him because he himself was building and building, and he's incredible. So I cannot wait for people to devour a new villain and just enjoy a very cool looking villain for sure.
I think we're gonna get a couple of Halloween costumes for
That'd be
sure.
great.
I just want to add what's really fun about all of what all of these women did and all of these films that we're talking about is they took a supernatural power that you typically might have in a horror film, but that power is now going against all different characters that we typically see in some form of erasure, if you will. They're sort of diminished, and they're not thought of as strong. They're thought of as dispensable. And in all these cases, those dispensable characters rise up in a way that is so heroic and powerful and just new. It's really just fresh. I think it makes its mark in redefining what we see as diminished or irregarded characters.
Absolutely. I mean, and Marty said it best. Like, honestly, when I was watching the film, I was thinking those exact same things. Have I ever seen, maybe when like in season 7 or 8 of Buffy, we saw a Slayer of color, and maybe, but like, not in this way, not dedicated like this. Marty, speaking of cast, Keith David, he is obviously a horror icon, but he is one of the most, he is such an accomplished actor, and he gives a performance in this movie that, I again, don't want to spoil anything. All I will say is he has a monologue at the end of the film that I thought was breathtaking and powerful and heartbreaking, and asking some really tough, complicated questions from the perspective of an older generation to a younger generation. Can you talk not only about working with him, but about fleshing out his character and how and why he is so important to this story?
It was so wonderful to work with him. I remember one of the first movies I'd seen him in was Requiem for a Dream, and I remember his voice. I was like, oh my God, you are terrifying. And honestly, he's kind of like that in real life. He just has so much power. When he comes into a room, everybody turns. He just commands this presence. I think he's one of the most powerful people I've ever met in real life that are just like, that's just him, and he's an amazing, accomplished actor, like you said. I mean, he's been acting way before I was born. And so just hearing his breadth of work, working on The Thing, he was just telling me being on set on that, I'm like, oh my God, you're incredible. But he's one of those actors he puts himself in the character and rarely leaves it. So he would be walking around the halls whistling, and it was really scary. just him walking and whistling and humming and this like really haunting voice. He's a very specific actor. He wants to know every detail of how this person operates, where he comes from, his history, and his history of this character goes far, far, far way back. And so it was really fun to kind of create that with him, and to I don't want to reveal anything, but like to really find all those details of a very full-fledged life that he has created and what he's turned into. So yeah, I don't want to get into it, but.
And how about like the generational divide? I noticed, throughout all of the films, actually, we have an older character and a younger character. Sometimes they're at odds, sometimes they're not. Yes. But can you talk about, especially within the context of Katrina, post Katrina, and the city of New Orleans, which is a character in your film, I would argue. Can you talk a little bit about that? Conflict isn't the right word, but those opposing viewpoints.
Yeah, I mean, since he is a lot older than our main character, there was a lot of beliefs that he had held and had experienced throughout his lifetime. I remember the first night we got together, and he was just telling me all these stories of teachers that would never cast him because they're like, you would never be a protagonist, you would never be a lead character. So like he had experienced so much racism himself, but pushed through and really succeeded as such a prolific actor because of his faith in knowing his gift is so much bigger than what the limits that people saw him as. And so he had a lot of similarities to the character that he plays in the movie, and he could totally understand how someone could turn into what his character is. And also with the younger generation of, understanding more, seeing the bigger picture, and seeing that revenge can actually, it can ruin you. And so you've got to rise above just the revenge part and say, what can we do to work together? And I think that's what the youth of today are trying to figure out, in while we were shooting the movie, it was stopped by the pandemic. It was stopped by the protests. That was huge for all of us to experience, because now that it was like this breaking open of America's history, all this oppression, and now it was like blatant in our faces that racism still exists. And while we're shooting this movie exploring racism, it's happening in our country. And it was so, it was very strange and emotional for all of us to experience this in real life and then play it on the screen and talk about it and try to incorporate it even more with current events, because all of the history that has happened with the United States and slavery and up to now, it matters. You know, context matters. You know, there's a scene in the movie that her father says context matters, because the monsters in our movie aren't just, you know, for fantasy's sake. They're so much deeper. It's because of the bad deeds that you know, of the fathers who had formed this country, and now it has broken open, and we're experiencing so much anger, hatred, sadness, and now we're able to look at it, and now the younger people, our community, want to look at it and change it for the better and work together. So yeah.
That's really powerful. Marcella, I, you know, wanted to ask you, and you touched on this very briefly earlier, but, you know, something that I thought was really interesting about the characters in your film is that it doesn't seem like they're on opposite sides of the spectrum. It just seems like they have a different approach to, for various reasons, about how to sort of honor their heritage, how to sort of take that forward. You know, you mentioned, you know, your grandparents wanting to, you know, break the egg, and your parents being like, we'll go to the doctor. So can you talk about, like, I thought that was so interesting, because I feel like it would be so easy to have it be like black and white, polar opposites, but this has more nuance. So as a writer, can you please talk about, you know, teasing that out a little bit?
Yes, I wanted to show those kinds of characters because, like I said, it's characters I never saw growing up, and especially in horror. We never see these kind of Latino characters. And so growing up, I did grow up kind of between those two worlds of having very Mexican traditional grandparents who kind of believed in those old world curses, legends. I grew up listening, you know, to all of them. That's why I got obsessed with horror. But then I also grew up with my American parents who were firstborn Americans here. And so being very American, and then we were raised speaking English first, and I had to learn Spanish later. And so for the lead characters, I wanted to show that dynamic, because that's also something I never really get to see in films, of a Latina who speaks English first and can feel kind of ostracized from a community because of a language barrier. And she's married to someone who is, you know, an immigrant from Mexico, whose Spanish is his first language, who kind of believes in these curses of the old world. And she was more American. And I wanted to show, because we exist, so many of us exist in the country, you know, second, third, fourth generations, that English is our first language, but it's not something that's ever talked about or really fully explored. And so I didn't want our lead couple to be, you know, really angry or like at each other, like you were saying. I wanted to show this is our dynamic that we have here in the United States, of, you know, English speakers or, you know, foreign born, and how do we feel about each other, and we have different views of things or different ways that we believe in our old country, old views that we were raised, and then we have more American views, and how do we come together. So that was really important for me, is to show the different aspects of Latino characters that we never get to see, and that are not the lead characters, that are usually, you know, if they are a person of color or Latino, it's a small little side secondary character or horror, they're killed off quickly. And this explores them as the leads, and explores those relationships, and explores those ideas and that we don't talk about within our Latino community. So that was very important for me, to write a story about these characters and show what we hardly ever see. And I was so grateful to Blumhouse and Amazon for really understanding the story, because it is so much more than a horror story. There's, you know, deals with racism, immigration, and I think it's a great way to tell it through a horror lens. So it doesn't feel like this, you know, after school special, but you are learning something at the end of this film. You will be educated and learn about this underrepresented community.
Lisa, you know, as the executive producer sort of overseeing, or, you know, all of these films, can you talk about what you saw your role as in producing these films?
Yeah, I mean, it was really fun for me because I hadn't really done television, mainly done individual features that you go on these 3-year journeys with. And this was very fast because we were doing sort of these, there's 8 in the whole series. And I was doing 7 of them just like back to back to back. And so I saw it as very much initially, okay, I'll be this guide, I will be a mentor where I can be. And then it started to really progress because these ideas were so wonderfully fresh, which is why they were chosen. The subject matter and then choosing of the filmmakers sometimes was separate from the subject matter. Like in the case of Marty, she wasn't originating that screenplay. That was done with Sherman and Maggie Molina were brought it in to Blumhouse. But then when we were listening to all these different directors pitch, you listen to Marty's pitch and you're like, yes, okay, this is just going to lift this, so fun. And then Gigi had originated her idea, and then we brought in other people, and it became this very collaborative process. I mean, with the case of Madras, was written obviously by Marcella and then her partner, and then we brought in Ryan came in, and Ryan Zaragoza to direct it. And it just became this, for me, as much of a learning experience as also being able to be a mentor for some of these filmmakers. I learned a lot of things from them from a fresh perspective. And I think what was the most important thing is that we were all leaning into, in a way, we knew you want to entertain absolutely with the genre. It's the thing that people come to, but we were talking about this genre and what lends itself for these kind of stories for me is that you're always pushing boundaries. And everyone here wanted to push boundaries. Blumhouse, Amazon, as well as the filmmakers for sure. And so all of us really into that, including the cast and the writers. So that was a journey that I think went a little further than even the expectations. And that's why I think these films sort of, they're just so fresh and a really kind of shocking in all the right ways.
I couldn't agree more. And so I am being told that we are actually at 45 minutes, which is shocking to me because I could keep talking to you all. I feel like we have just scratched the surface. So to close out, I would love to ask all of our creators, there are really powerful themes here. There are also really great scares and creatures and all the goodies that you expect from Blumhouse. So Gigi, let's start with you, but everybody as well. Like what is it that you hope the audience knows going in and that they take away from watching your film?
Well, definitely, I hope people watch this with their grandparents. I think it's time we make a horror movie that you can watch with your abuelos, hugging them, be like, this is you on screen. You are the hero, finally. It's been since Batteries Not Included or Cocoon. I can't even remember the last time, that they're the ones kicking butt like back in the days with the Goonies and stuff like that. I hope people go in ready to just have a good time, have a really good time. It's okay to laugh and be grossed out. I mean, I directed this, so do expect some gross things and and very wacky choices. But for me, it was important to make a film, especially with the year we've had, or almost 2, unfortunately, to give us a film to escape and have a good time. That was definitely the goal, to make something that is pure escapism and laughing and having humor while at the same time having a lot of blood. But yeah,
and goo and all the things.
All the things.
Yes. Marty, how about you?
Same. I mean, I want people to watch the movie and remember what it feels like to be a teenager, an awkward teenager, not knowing how you fit into the world, remembering, your first kiss, your first love. But also, I want them to enjoy and be scared of the vampires, because that is one of my favorite parts about making this movie, was to be able to create a brand new vampire. And also make you think, like Gigi said, that we've been through some crazy stuff in this last 2 years. So there is a message in there, but it's also just really fun. So I want people to have a good time.
Marcella, without giving anything away, as you say at the end of this film, you absolutely learned something if you didn't know it already. The themes in this movie are as relevant as ever. So what would you like to tell the audience going in, and what do you hope they take away?
I hope the audience knows this is a movie for everyone. It's, deals with motherhood, about a sense of community, about embracing one's culture. So it's really universal themes. So I think it really applies to everyone, can relate on some level to this film, and also with some, great supernatural scares. And then I hope at the end that they do learn something when they come out of it that they perhaps didn't know it was going on, in a specific migrant community, and have more of an understanding and empathy for these underrepresented communities that I think are often so overlooked in this country, kind of disregarded. And so I was hoping to bring awareness to this community that we don't see, and educate them about some of the things that they have to go through that people aren't really aware of.
Axel, how about you?
Oh, sorry, just need to close my door because I'm roasting in my car. I hope that first of all, I hope that people will fall in love with Judith. I hope that they will absolutely adore her and find her fun, and then stick with her journey and be intrigued and wonder what the hell is going on in that nursing home. And then at the end, it kind of ends on the note that I'm hoping is unexpected, where people make choices that are perhaps not what we usually see in movies. And I would really like people to discuss whether they would make the same choice or not. We even had the debate on set, and it was very interesting how the division was almost kind of 50-50 depending on age. And if you're younger, you probably will disagree. And it's very interesting, but I would love for people to have a little bit of a discussion. And yeah, I'd love to see what they think.
Absolute thought-provoking, to say the least. Lisa, to close here, you working for Blumhouse, has such powerful horror connotations. So what do you hope the audience, the Beyond Fest audience, and the general audience, experience when they're watching this round of Welcome to the Blumhouse?
Yeah, so much of what a lot of these gals have said is just really they are all at their core really fun and super tense. And I think you'll find yourself on the edge of your seat much of the time. But I really hope that everybody also kind of walks away with just a slightly tweaked perspective of what is power and what isn't, because I think that's what this whole wave of films is sort of challenging.
Fabulous. Well, to all of our creatives and to Amazon, Blumhouse, and Beyond Fest, thank you so much for this opportunity to talk to you all about your films. I learned so much, and I think the audience is going to dig them. So thank you all. Happy Halloween. And my name is Clarke Wolfe. Thanks again, and take care, everyone.
Bye.
Happy Halloween.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Clarke.
Bye.
All right. Thank you, everyone.